I noticed the bandage when she poured my coffee. It was small, barely visible beneath the edge of her hairline, a strip of white gauze pressed against dark skin. Anyone else might have missed it. In my world, people were trained not to notice details unless ordered to. But I had survived by noticing everything. Her hands didn't shake. Her posture didn't change. Only the bandage betrayed her. I looked up slowly, keeping my expression neutral. In this house, reactions were currency. She stood the way she always did. Quiet, eyes lowered, movements efficient. Loyal. Invisible by design. How did that happen? I asked. My voice was calm, conversational. Deadlier than shouting. She froze for half a second. Just half. Long enough. I slipped, senor, she said. In the laundry room. Why? Not a good one. I nodded once and dismissed her with a wave of my hand, watching as she retreated. She moved faster than usual, like someone trying to outrun a thought. When the door closed behind her, the room felt heavier. People think power is loud. They're wrong. Power listens. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting to the window overlooking Barcelona's skyline. This city had made me what I was. It had taught me cruelty early, necessity faster. I hadn't survived this long by being sentimental. And yet, I couldn't stop seeing the bandage. She'd worked for me for 3 years. Never late. Never careless. Never injured. I knew the schedules of my men, the habits of my enemies, the bank accounts of politicians who smiled on television and begged in private. I knew my household too. She didn't slip. I finished my coffee and stood, straightening my jacket. Miguel, I called. My head of security appeared instantly. See, Chief. Who else was in the house yesterday evening? Miguel hesitated. A bad sign. Maintenance staff. One of the drivers. And, he stopped. And, I asked quietly. And your cousin's man. The one you allowed to stay temporarily. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Temporary guests were often permanent problems. Find out everything, I said. Without alarming anyone. Miguel nodded and left. I should have returned to business. Shipments were delayed. A rival family was testing my borders. Money moved slower when fear weakened. These were the things that normally consumed me. But that morning all I could think about was a woman who cleaned my floors and avoided my eyes. I found her later in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with precise, practiced movements. She didn't look up when I entered. No greeting. No apology. Just silence. Look at me, I said. Slowly she raised her head. The bruise beneath the bandage had darkened. Purple bleeding into yellow. Old enough to hurt. New enough to matter. You don't lie well, I said. Her lips parted then closed. Her eyes shone but no tears fell. That took strength. Or fear. I'm not asking again, I continued. Who did this? Silence. In my world, silence was usually defiance. Or death. But this silence was different. It was protective. The kind people used when telling the truth would cost more than the lie. I slipped, she repeated, softer this time. I studied her. Really studied her. The way her shoulders curled inward as if making herself smaller could make her safer. The way her fingers tightened around the knife. Fear lived in houses like mine. Everyone knew that. But fear was supposed to belong to outsiders, not the people under my roof. I turned away. Finish your work, I said. And stay inside today. She looked up sharply. Senor. That wasn't a request. I left before she could speak again. By evening Miguel had his answers. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been a slip. It hadn't been the first time. The man staying in my house, the one I'd tolerated out of family obligation, had cornered her. Spoken to her like property. Touched her like she had no right to refuse. When she resisted, he reminded her who she was. A maid. Disposable. The bandage was mercy compared to what could have happened. I dismissed Miguel with a nod and stood alone in my office, the city lights flickering below. Rage didn't explode inside me. It sharpened. I had built my empire on rules. You don't steal from me. You don't lie to me. And you do not harm what is under my protection. She didn't know it yet. But by working in my house she was under my protection. I thought of her eyes. The way she'd endured without complaint. The way she'd lied not to protect herself but to avoid trouble. People like her survived by staying quiet. People like me survived by deciding when silence ended. If this story is already making you think about power, about silence, about what people endure unseen, share your thoughts below. Sometimes the smallest details change everything. I picked up my phone and made one call. Tell him to come to me, I said. Yow. The bandage was only the beginning. He didn't deny it. That was the first thing that told me how deep this went. My cousin's man stood in front of my desk with the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced consequences. He didn't look afraid. Not yet. He leaned back slightly as if we were discussing an inconvenience rather than a crime. She's exaggerating, he said. You know how they are. The word landed heavier than a confession. I studied him without speaking. Silence unsettles people more than violence. It gives their mind space to imagine what's coming next. You hurt someone in my house, I finally said. He shrugged. She's staff. I didn't kill her. That was when I knew he wouldn't leave this room the same man. But punishment wasn't my first move. Not yet. I needed to understand something far more important. Why she stayed silent. I dismissed him with a gesture, ordering Miguel to keep him under watch. Not a cell. Not restraints. Comfort makes people careless. Careless people make mistakes. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed every interaction I'd ever had with her. The way she avoided corridors when men were present. How she volunteered for the night shift. How she flinched, not dramatically, just enough to notice when voices rose. Fear learned and practiced. I realized something uncomfortable then. This wasn't just about him. This was about a lifetime of knowing that speaking up rarely helps people like her. The next morning I found her in the laundry room. She was alone, folding sheets with mechanical precision. When she saw me, her body stiffened. Not guilt. Expectation. As if she'd been waiting for consequences. Sit, I said, pulling out a chair. She didn't move. I'm not angry with you, I added. That made it worse. She sat slowly, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. The bandage had been changed. Fresh. Clean. Someone had helped her. Not him. Do you know why I didn't punish him yesterday? I asked. Her shoulders tightened. She shook her head. Because I needed to know why you thought staying silent was safer than telling me. Her breath caught. Still no words. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You work in my house. You are protected here. Or you should be. She laughed then. Not loudly. Not bitterly. Just tired. Men like you, she said softly, still not looking at me, don't protect women like me. Even when you think you do. The honesty hit harder than any accusation. Explain, I said. She hesitated, then spoke like someone opening an old wound carefully, afraid it might bleed again. Because protection has conditions. And I don't meet them. I felt something twist in my chest. He told me about past houses. Past employers. Smiles that disappeared when complaints were made. Threats disguised as advice. How reporting abuse always led to losing work, housing, dignity. Silence, she said, is how you keep what little safety you have. I understood power. I had never understood this kind of survival. I asked him to leave you alone, she continued. He laughed. He said no one would believe me. She finally looked up then. And he was right. I stood abruptly, turning away before she could see my expression. Rage again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was heavy, old, shameful. Because I realized something else. I had given that man access. I had created the danger. And my reputation, the very thing that kept others afraid, had kept her silent. I believe you, I said. Her eyes widened just slightly. Not relief. Suspicion. Belief to someone like her was unfamiliar. I shouldn't have had to, she replied. He was right. From that moment everything shifted. I moved her quarters closer to the main house. Increased security without explanation. Restricted who could enter. Not visibly. Quietly. Safety should never feel like a punishment. The man began to panic. He sensed the change. People like him always do when the air shifts. He tried to contact allies. Tried to bargain. Tried to remind me of family ties. Family is a word men use when they want forgiveness without accountability. I visited her once more before the storm broke. I'm going to handle this, I told her. But I need you to know something. She waited. You don't owe me silence. Not now. Not ever. She swallowed hard. What if speaking costs me everything? I met her gaze. Then it becomes my responsibility to make sure it doesn't. Trust doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in fragments. A look held a second longer. A breath released instead of held. She nodded. Just once. That night I made my decision. Power had given me many things. Money, fear, obedience. But this was the first time I understood its real purpose. Not domination. Intervention. The silence had protected her until now. Tomorrow it would protect no one. Truth never arrives loudly. It creeps in through patterns, through things people assume you won't connect. I built my life reading those patterns. Who spoke too quickly, who stayed silent too long, who avoided eye contact when there was nothing to hide. This time the truth was wrapped in fear. I didn't interrogate him. Interrogations make men defensive, and defensive men lie well. That I watched. I let him believe he still had time. He drank more. Slept less. Spoke too much. The man who'd once swaggered through my house now paced like an animal sensing a trap. My people noticed. They always do. I noticed something else. She was quieter. Not submissive, she had always been that. This was different. Her movements were careful, as if she were preparing for something to fall. She avoided mirrors. Covered the bandage with scarves even indoors. Fear doesn't disappear when danger pauses. It waits. I found her late one night in the courtyard, sitting alone beneath the orange trees. Barcelona hummed beyond the walls, unaware of the lives breaking quietly inside them. You shouldn't be out here alone, I said. She startled, then relaxed when she saw me. That reaction stayed with me longer than it should have. I can't sleep, she replied. Neither can I. I sat across from her, keeping distance. Authority doesn't always need proximity. Sometimes it needs restraint. Do you know what scares men like him? I asked. She shook her head. Being seen, I said. Not punished. Exposed. She folded her arms. That kind of man is never exposed. Only protected. That depends on who's watching. She studied me then, searching for something beneath my words. People who have been hurt learn to read intentions like a second language. I'm not asking you to testify, I said. I'm asking you to tell me everything. Privately. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her sleeve. If I tell you, she whispered, you'll see me differently. I answered without hesitation. I already do. She spoke slowly at first, choosing each word like it might be used against her later. Then the story began to spill. How he cornered her in hallways. How he learned her schedule. How he reminded her she needed the job. How he said my name like a shield, he'll never side with you. Every sentence was a knife. Not because of what he did, but because of how confident he'd been that nothing would happen. When she finished, there was no drama. No tears. Just exhaustion. I don't want revenge, she said. I just want it to stop. That was when I understood what justice actually meant. Not spectacle. Not blood. Endings. I recorded nothing. No devices. No witnesses. Just memory. People think evidence is always physical. They forget that power remembers. The next day I set a trap. Quiet ones are the most effective. I told him he was free to leave. That the issue had been misunderstood. Relief flooded his face so quickly it disgusted me. Men like him don't repent. They relax. He packed his bags that night. That was when we followed him. He met someone outside the city. A woman. Well-dressed. Confident. She listened carefully while he spoke with the self-righteous fury of a man wronged. My aunt. The pieces aligned. She had always resented my control. Always believed softness was weakness. Allowing a maid to accuse her ally would have been, to her, a dangerous precedent. I watched from a distance as they spoke. My past moved in front of me like a ghost I'd never buried. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Often it comes from those who think they deserve your throne. I returned home with clarity I hadn't felt in years. The household slept. He didn't. I found her in the kitchen again, as if some habits were harder to break than fear. It's bigger than him, I said. She nodded. It always is. You're not the first, I continued. And if I do nothing, you won't be the last. She didn't ask what I planned. Survivors know better than to demand promises. What happens to me? She asked quietly. The question wasn't about employment. It was about safety. About belonging. You stay, I said. If you want to. She searched my face. For deceit. For pity. She found neither. Why? She asked. I thought of all the times power had been used in my name to excuse cruelty. Because this house doesn't deserve your silence, I replied. It has to earn your presence. She closed her eyes then just for a moment. When she opened them, something had shifted. Not trust. Hope. That night I prepared for war. Not with guns or threats, but with truth positioned where it could do the most damage. Shadows protect liars. I was about to turn on the lights. Choosing sides sounds simple to people who have never stood in the middle. They imagine a clear line, right on one side, wrong on the other. In my world, lines blur. Loyalty muddies truth. Blood excuses betrayal. And power convinces men they don't have to choose at all. I had spent years avoiding this moment. Not because I didn't know what was right, but because I knew the cost. My aunt had helped raise me after my father died. She'd stood beside me when others tried to carve pieces from what I inherited. She believed ruthlessness was survival, that mercy was a luxury for men who hadn't bled. And now she had chosen him. I summoned her the next evening. She arrived composed, dressed impeccably, eyes sharp with intelligence and calculation. She didn't sit until I gestured. A small defiance. A reminder. You sent for me, she said. Yes. Nothing more. Silence again, this time deliberate. She smiled faintly. You've been distant. You've been busy. Her eyes flickered. Just once. I leaned forward. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Notice what? She asked smoothly. Your interference. She laughed, low and controlled. You're talking about a misunderstanding with staff? Staff. The same word. Different mouth. You protected him, I said. I protected family, she corrected. And stability. Something you're risking over a maid. I felt no anger then. Only clarity. She was hurt in my house, I said. By a man you enabled. My aunt tilted her head. You're becoming sentimental. No, I replied. I'm becoming precise. I laid out what I knew, not everything, just enough. The meeting outside the city. The promises. The assumption that I would prioritize blood over responsibility. You're overestimating her importance, my aunt said coldly, and underestimating what weakness invites. That word again. Weakness. I've ruled through fear, I said. And through strategy. Neither failed me. She leaned back. Until now. Until now, I agreed. Because this time fear would be the easy path. Her gaze sharpened. So what are you choosing? I stood. I'm choosing the line you crossed. She rose too, face hardening. Then you choose consequences. Already did. I walked out before she could say more. Conversations like that don't end in agreement. They end in inevitability. That night I doubled security, not around myself but around her. She noticed. Fear doesn't belong to one class of people. It visits anyone who realizes the rules have changed. She avoided me. I avoided him. And the house held its breath. The woman at the center of this storm knew something was coming. I found her in the small sitting room near her quarters, hands folded, posture straight. She didn't look surprised to see me. You've chosen, she said. Yes. Against them. Against what they represent. She studied me carefully. And if that choice costs you? I thought of the empire I'd built. The men who followed me. The blood already on my hands. It already has, I said. I'm just acknowledging it now. She nodded slowly. I don't want you dragged into this, I added. What happens next won't be quiet. She met my gaze steady. Nothing in my life ever has been. There was strength there. Not loud. Not performative. Earned. We'll move you, I said. Somewhere safe. Her jaw tightened. Running doesn't feel like safety. It's temporary. So was silence, she replied. I didn't argue. He was right. Instead I said, then stay close. The confrontation came sooner than expected. My aunt confronted me the following afternoon, fury barely contained beneath civility. You're humiliating me, she said, over someone who will never belong in this world. This world, I replied, is changing. Because of her, she scoffed. No, I said quietly. Because of me. That was the moment she understood. She had miscalculated, not my affection but my resolve. I won't be threatened, she warned. Neither will she, I answered. The silence that followed was final. That night I gave the order. Not for violence. For exposure. Everything she'd hidden. Every alliance she'd abused. Every secret she thought untouchable. Power fractures when light hits it from the right angle. Before dawn she was isolated. Politically, financially, socially. The man she'd protected vanished into irrelevance, discarded by the very systems he trusted. No blood spilled, but everything changed. I returned home as the sun rose. She was waiting. It's over, she asked. For them, I said. Not for you. She frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, I replied, you get to decide who you are next. Not them. She exhaled, a breath she'd been holding for years. For the first time since I'd known her, she smiled. Not because she'd been saved, but because she'd been seen. Power feels different when you stop using it to dominate. I'd spent most of my life believing power meant control. Over men, over territory, over outcomes. But the night everything settled, when the noise finally died down, I realized something unsettling. Real power doesn't shout. It stands still and makes the world adjust around it. The house was quiet again. Not the tense quiet from before. The kind that feels like holding your breath, but a softer one. Like exhaling after a storm. She moved differently now. Not boldly. Not recklessly. Just less afraid. I noticed it in the small things. She walked through corridors without hugging the walls. She met my eyes when she spoke. She no longer flinched at raised voices because there were fewer of them. Safety changes posture before it changes belief. I called her into my office 2 days later. She hesitated at the doorway, habit still stronger than trust. You're not in trouble, I said. She almost smiled at that. Almost. I gestured for her to sit. She did, hands folded neatly, waiting. People like her are always waiting. For permission, for punishment, for loss. I want to be clear, I began. What happened to you won't be buried. Her shoulders stiffened. I don't want pity. I'm not offering it, I replied. I'm offering accountability. She listened closely now. He's gone, I continued. So is anyone who thought your silence was protection for them. Her breath caught, not in relief but disbelief. You didn't have to do all that, she said quietly. I did, I answered. Because if power only protects itself, it rots. She considered that. What happens if people say I only mattered because you chose me, she asked. The question was sharp. Honest. Then they misunderstand, I said. I didn't choose you because you were convenient. I chose you because you were right. She absorbed that slowly. For the first time I saw anger flicker behind her composure. Not wild. Focused. Do you know how many men like him exist? She asked. In houses like this? Yes, I said. And they're watching now. What they see matters. That's why I didn't make this quiet, I replied. Fear spreads fast. But so does consequence. She nodded once. Later that evening I overheard her laughing. It startled me more than the bandage ever had. It was brief. Almost surprised, like it escaped without permission. One of the younger staff had said something foolish and she'd laughed before catching herself. Joy can feel dangerous after trauma. Like a trap. I didn't interrupt. Instead I realized something else had shifted. The house followed her lead. Not consciously. But people sense change the way animals sense weather. They spoke to her with more respect. They waited for her opinion. They noticed when she entered a room. Dignity is contagious. I called a meeting the next morning. Not with soldiers. Not with criminals. With staff. That alone sent a message. I stood at the head of the room and spoke plainly. No one in this house is disposable, I said. Anyone who believes otherwise is free to leave. No one moved. I watched faces, calculating, uncertain, afraid. Protection, I continued, is not a privilege here. It's a rule. She stood at the side of the room, eyes lowered, but I saw the way her spine straightened. Afterward she approached me. You didn't have to say my name, she said. I didn't, I replied. I said the truth. Silence lingered between us. Different now. Not heavy. Do you regret it? She asked finally. Choosing this. I asked. She nodded. I thought of my aunt. Of alliances burned. Of power reshaped. No, I said. But I know what it costs. She looked at me carefully. And me. You cost me nothing, I said. You reminded me what power was for. That night she stood on the balcony overlooking the city, arms wrapped around herself, not in fear but thought. I joined her, keeping space. They won't forget, she said. What you did. I don't want them to, I replied. He turned to me. What if they come back? They won't, I said calmly. And if they do, they'll find a house that no longer keeps secrets for them. She let out a slow breath. For the first time I didn't feel like a man ruling over something fragile. I felt like a man responsible for it. Power had been used. And for once, it had been used right. Respect doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with apologies or grand gestures. It settles quietly in the way doors are held open, in how voices soften without being told, in how someone no longer has to shrink to fit the room. That was how I knew things were different. She no longer asked permission to exist. Weeks passed. The city moved on as it always does. Scandals fade when there's no blood to entertain them. Power realigns. People adjust. But inside my house something permanent had shifted. She chose to stay. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she wanted to. That distinction mattered more than any contract. One morning I found her in the study reorganizing shelves I hadn't touched in years. She looked up, surprised but not alarmed. I hope this is all right, she said. The dust was bothering me. It's fine, I replied. You don't need to explain yourself. She paused, then nodded slowly as if testing the weight of that freedom. I watched her work for a moment. Confident. Unrushed. Present. People mistake safety for comfort. They're not the same. Safety allows people to grow. I've been thinking, she said without looking at me. About leaving. My chest tightened, not with fear but acceptance. All right, I said. When? She smiled faintly. Not yet. I waited. I realized I don't want to leave because I'm afraid anymore, she continued. If I go, it'll be because I'm ready. I nodded. That's how it should be. She turned to face me fully. You know, you didn't just protect me. I know, I said. You changed the rules, she finished. Rules outlive people. That's what makes them powerful. There were moments after that, quiet ones, that meant more than confrontations ever had. Sharing coffee without hierarchy. Conversations that didn't end when I entered the room. The way she corrected someone openly, and wasn't punished for it. Respect is not fear behaving politely. It's recognition. One evening as the sun dipped low over Barcelona, she stood beside me on the terrace. Do you ever wonder, she asked, who you'd be if no one was afraid of you? The question was unexpected. Honest. I'm finding out, I replied. He studied the city lights. It suits you. I almost laughed at that. I had ruled through intimidation for so long that calm felt unfamiliar. But unfamiliar didn't mean wrong. If anything, it felt earned. The staff changed too. Slowly, then all at once. Voices grew steadier. Laughter became less rare. People stayed longer. Not because they were trapped, but because they were treated fairly. Fear creates obedience. Respect creates loyalty. I saw her one last time with the bandage off completely. The bruise had faded, leaving only memory behind. You don't hide anymore, I said. She met my gaze. I don't need to. There was no romance in that moment. No dramatic confession. Just two people standing on equal ground for the first time. And that was enough. If this story spoke to you, not because of power or crime but because of dignity, protection, and earned respect, then you're already part of this space. Stay with us. These are the stories we tell here. Some people think redemption requires losing everything first. They're wrong. Sometimes redemption looks like learning how to hold power without crushing the people beneath it. Sometimes it looks like listening. Sometimes it looks like a woman who no longer lowers her eyes, and a man who no longer needs her to. That's what respect looks like.